No further speakers. I'll call the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank all the members this evening for their contribution to this debate. And when the opposition leader first got up and spoke about cop-outs, cover-ups and hiding, well, I thought she was talking about the Labor Party, certainly not about us. And there's been saying that the CLP has a lack of credibility in fiscal frameworks. Well, again, I thought that was pretty rich, questioning our credibility in the fiscal area. And the opposition leader said that dollars matter. And I tell you what, Mr Deputy Speaker, dollars absolutely do matter. And I don't think they really mattered to the previous Labor government because, of course, the reason we're here talking about the debt cap is because of the way that the previous Labor government were spending money. And integrity and accountability, particularly in that fiscal space, said I found it quite rich for the opposition leader to be speaking over and over about that. It just didn't make any sense, Mr Deputy Speaker. Excuse me. I just want to put the record straight on a couple of things. I did note the comments from the member for Johnson and in her contribution. And a lot of the contribution that the member for Johnson was about was the previous Labor government and what they had been doing with the finances, because now we find ourselves in the position having to deal with that mismanagement. But the one thing I need to correct is that when the member for Johnson said that the private sector investment in the Territory is minuscule, you're quite incorrect on that fact. Our economy is $35 billion. That is the total economy of the Northern Territory, and our budget is only $9 billion. So it is that business and that investment from the private sector that drives our economy with that $35 billion. So I just wanted to make that point, Mr Deputy Speaker. But also that the opposition leader said that the CLP shuts down scrutiny like a whack-a-mole. We've been nothing but upfront about our budget position. And of course, I've been out with the Under-Treasurers here with us, and when we drove from Darwin down to Katherine Tennant Creek to Alice Springs to talk about the financial mess that we found ourselves in, we have been nothing but open and transparent about the budget position that the Territory is in. And I want to be clear on that too, Mr Deputy Speaker, for the future, because there's a lot of talk that we're not being transparent about the budget, that we're trying to hide things away. Nothing could be further from the truth, Mr Deputy Speaker. I will always be upfront with Territorians about our financial position. I will always be open to share those financial positions with every Territorian, and the commitment from this government is to get out there and share that position ongoing. So not only are we are in the position where we have to repeal this debt cap at the moment because of the financial position we find ourselves put in by the previous Labor government, but we'll be open and transparent with all Territorians about our fiscal position into the future. So we'll be delivering a budget in May, and then we'll be out after that budget talking to Territorians. We'll be out doing another roadshow. I hope the Under-Treasurer likes driving, because we're going to be out on the road again, and we'll be out visiting all those communities and those regional places where we can to talk about what the financial position of the Northern Territory is and what we're doing to try and deal with the issues that we've been left with by Labor, because they are legacy issues, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's going to take us, sadly, a long time to fix those legacy issues. And the one thing I note from the member for Nelson in his contribution, in the PFO from 2024, so the pre-election fiscal outlook report published before Labor lost government last year, there is a section in that on risks and contingent liabilities. And the opposition leader claimed that I've never scrutinised a budget paper. Well, I think she's quite wrong there, because I certainly scrutinised her governments over the years. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, on page 40 of this report, it says that funding for critical services like hospitals were, and I quote, budgeted to reduce or cease over the forward estimates. It's written in the pre-election fiscal outlook report. It's It's there in black and white, Mr Deputy Speaker, that Labor knew about this and knew that this funding was dropping off a cliff. And the Leader of the Opposition was a member of course, Budget Cabinet, and she knew this. If she didn't know this, then she wasn't doing her job in Budget Cabinet. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Opposition Leader is correct that the former Labor government met all the reporting requirements and ticked all their boxes. However, they were actively failing to budget for the Territory's future so that their fiscal aggregates actually look better. And that is the problem we find ourselves in, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the funding that was dropping off a cliff for all these projects. They had all these projects running out into the future, but they were only funding them year by year by year to try and hide the fact that they were going to hit the debt ceiling and they were going to hit it hard. And of course, Labor failed to act with integrity and be 100% transparent, Mr Deputy Speaker, about the Territory's true financial position, which is actually worse than we all thought. But I said I'll bring it back now to what we're actually here to talk about, and that is the Fiscal Integrity and Transparency Amendment Bill. And of course, the former government, as we know, introduced that borrowing limit, which came into effect on July 2021, when there was a projection of being $30 billion in debt under that former Treasurer. And of course, that triggered the Langelant report, amongst a number of other things, and that's when the debt ceiling was introduced. But as many have spoken about tonight, it seemed a green light, the Labor government. Oh, we can spend up to $15 billion, and of course away they went. And I said, just in the last 18 months alone, an increase in debt by $2 billion. But we have to have, a government has to have the flexibility to spend. And I don't like borrowing. I don't like spending money and throwing it after bad. I'm very, very, I suppose, tight with Territory taxpayers' money. But at the end of the day, we have to get to a point where, I think everyone's heard the term, sometimes you've got to spend a little money to make a little money. We're at a point in time now, Mr Deputy Speaker, where we have no outs when it comes to the debt cap. Labor have left us in a position where the breach of the debt cap is absolutely and utterly inevitable. The only way to stop breaching that debt cap, and I've said it publicly during the roadshow, and I've said it to the media, would be to get rid of 4,000 public servants tomorrow. That would be the only way that we could not breach that debt cap. And Mr Deputy Speaker, that would be absolutely and utterly irresponsible. We would kill the Territory if we did that, and that's something that I'm not willing to do. So we have to get to the point where we are going to need to borrow money and to deliver those services for Territorians as we work through fixing the budget. And I've been working through the infrastructure program, and the opposition leader spoke at length about that today. And I look at what Labor done to the infrastructure program commencing in about 2021-22. It went through the roof. But there was the announcements of these record spends in infrastructure. Over $4 billion, Mr Deputy Speaker, in investments into infrastructure. Sadly, Mr Deputy Speaker, they didn't have the cash to be able to do it. So the cash to be able to deliver those projects just wasn't there, and is still not there. And when you look at what they had budgeted for this year, it was falling off a cliff. And they did this in such a way, Mr Speaker, so that it didn't show a breach of the debt ceiling in the outer years. So they would have published it and done it, and then gone and borrowed more money to be able to do their infrastructure program, again pushing us further and further towards that debt ceiling. Yes, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are facing fiscal challenges. Yes, these challenges, though, are created by the previous Labor government, and the opposition leader was a part of Budget Cabinet in that government. And to sit here and say the things that she said in debate this evening, just, as I said, is absolutely laughable. And I want to touch on one last thing before I finish up, Mr Deputy Speaker, because the opposition leader mentioned the undergrounding of the power. Now, it actually wasn't the CLP's idea to remove that. It was actually the Power and Water Corporation that came to me just after we got into government and spoke to me about that and said, Treasurer, we don't have the money to be able to do this. We said, we can't do it. not for the budget that Labor have given us, which was $65 million. And the Labor Party gaslit the people in the northern suburbs on this, because I've actually went away and I spoke in media about this just after we had to cease that funding, and I took a bit of an educated guess on how much it would cost to actually do the underground power out in the northern suburbs, and I thought it was around $600 million plus. And I'll tell you what, Mr Deputy Speaker, I wasn't far off the mark, because I actually got Power and Water to go away and do the sums, and they've come back with a very, very conservative figure as a minimum of $500 million to do underground power in the northern suburbs. So the Labor Party were gaslighting the people of the northern suburbs, saying that they were going to underground their power for $65 million. What an absolute joke. They were only, like many of their projects, they're out on their estimates. They're only out on this one by about $450 million. And that seems to be the thing with all the projects that they tend to deliver. We've only got to look at the overpass and Tiger Brennan. Yeah, it's a huge, great piece of infrastructure, but the budgeting for that one was way off the mark as well. And it seems to be a hallmark of the previous Labor government. Make these announcements, throw a few bucks at it, but in reality, they didn't do their sums and didn't do their homework because the funds just weren't there, or they just didn't have any idea on how much it was actually going to cost. And that's why we find ourselves in this fiscal position that we're in, Mr Deputy Speaker. We're going to have to remove the debt cap. We need that flexibility to be able to spend to deliver for Territorians. But I can tell you now, Mr Speaker, that on this side of the House and the Finocchiaro CLP Labor government, we are very, very fiscally responsible, and we'll be open and transparent at all times with Territorians on territory finances. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Treasurer. The question is the bill will be now read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The Clerk.
A bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Integrity and Transparency Act 2001.
Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I seek to leave to move to the third reading.
Is leave granted? No. We'll go to consideration in detail.